Alright, back for the third video here. In this video I'm going to talk about some advanced ways to make this work in the event that your class, like many, have abilities that are required by other abilities and build on each other. I'm going to remove this group for now. I'm going to go into group settings and just say uncheck enable. So my big idiot meter over here is going to be off for the example. So we have Mind Blast. It's a basic damage spell. We're tracking its cooldown as well as the existence of debuffs, these three dots on my target, and then a long-term cooldown over here. Give you a little Shadow Priest 101 so that you can understand the mechanics in a simple fashion, so you understand how I'm setting this up. Shadow Priests have a resource that can be gained by casting different spells, and they're called Shadow Orbs. So I'm going to cast my Mind Flay here until I get one to show up. There we go. So Shadow Orb, it's similar to the Paladin's Holy Power, combo points, things like that. So it's lasting for a minute from when I do it, and it can stack up to 3. When I have this resource on me and I use my Mind Blast, it consumes them and creates another buff called Empowered Shadow, which does a 30% increase to periodic shadow damage. So you can imagine that keeping this buff up is vital to doing your class's appropriate amount of damage. Yet you're having to track the cooldown on this Mind Blast, which is what activates it, as well as the existence of these orbs, which don't always show up. They kind of proc based on other spells. So in order to do a correct shadow rotation without any add-ons, you'd have to be looking up here and at the cooldown of Mind Blast down here, and it makes it very, very difficult. So I'm going to make a couple additions to my or modifications to my tell me when to help me build the logic in to make those decisions. And this applies to, like I said, paladins, rogues, anybody with a resource. So Mind Blast, I'm going to open it back up, and this is what we set up before, just a basic monitor the cooldown. The second tab here is conditions. It's blank. This is where all the advanced features can go, but it's really not very difficult. The creators of this add-on made it very user-friendly. So condition simply says what has to happen before, in addition to this, let's put some conditions on it. So I'm going to add one. These menus are extremely vast, but once you find what you're going to use, it's not a big deal. So I'm going to say, let's not use Mind Blast unless we have at least one Shadow Orb, which is what I need to engage that 30% bonus. So I looked in resources, and it's not considered a resource. But if you have mana, rage, energy, focus, runic power, all that jazz, it's in here. But Shadow Orbs are actually considered a buff. So I'm going to go to abilities, items, buffs, etc., and go into buff, and then you see duration, comparison, stacks, number of. So I'm just going to use stacks here. Same as before, we're going to type the name of the buff to check. In this case, it took me a little trial and error. At first I put Shadow Orbs, but that's actually a reference to the spec mastery. That's the thing. But Shadow Orb is actually the resource. So click that, and I'm going to track it on player. Player is always you. And then I'm going to say, I want to make sure there's at least one. So greater than or equal to, and then this is a slider. You can go crazy big, but I'm just going to say 1. Alright, in my case, if I have 1 or I have 3, I still get the same buff. So if I have 3, I do more damage with my attack, but what this condition is setting up just to make sure I don't use it unless I have a Shadow Orb, because I'll be wasting that orb and I won't get my bonus or my buff. So I'm going to say make sure I have at least one Shadow Orb. Okay, great. This little box here is the only check mine. It's similar to what it is on the other page. If it applies, use it, but anything you're tracking on yourself that you cast yourself, it's not necessarily something you have to worry about. So I'm going to click OK. Then I'm going to toggle. First thing you notice is Mind Blast has disappeared. It's not there, and that's because I said, the condition that in order for this to show up, or in our meaning is tell me to use it, has to have one shadow orb. So I'm going to generate one shadow orb, and you're going to see it pop up. Come on, shadow orb. There we go. So I've got a shadow orb. It has 60 seconds left. So this is lit up. It says, okay, it's not on cooldown, and you have a shadow orb. So your condition is met, and you're not on cooldown. So I'm going to hit it, and it uses it up, and I get my little empowered shadow buff. Super. So the next section, so I'm going to make a new icon here to track that buff on me. So icon type is buff debuff, enabled, show timer, it's a buff, always show it. When it's not there, we'll put it at like 35%. That's just the opacity, how transparent it is. And the name of the buff is Empowered Shadow. So I click it, hit OK. From time to time you're going to see this little pocket watch show up, and that means that for some reason the add-on doesn't know exactly which spell or ability you're talking about. So the way to fix that is just instead of typing the name in, or type it in and then look at the number on the end of it. In this case it's 95799. So type that in and hit OK. And then once you see the icon change, then you'll know you're on the right thing. So buff on player, timer, looks good. So I'm going to generate a shadow orb, and then I'm going to use it up, and you'll see the tracking of the different buff. Okay, got my shadow orb. I'm going to use it up, and you'll see that it basically starts tracking this empowered shadow. So 9 seconds left. Anyways, like I said, this is a 30% bonus to damage, so this is something I want rolling all the time. Alright. So to take it one step further, I also want to not use this up. I don't want to use Mind Blast again. Alright, let me show you. So I'm going to get myself a shadow orb. There we go. I'm going to use it. Okay. I'm going to go about my business, attacking, and okay, Mind Blast is ready again. Now I could use it, but I still have 5 seconds left of this buff, so I'd be, it'd be doubling that up. And as I do fight longer and longer, these numbers can get all out of sync because you don't get to exactly turn things on at the right time. So I'm going to add a little bit more logic into the conditions of this, and I'm going to say also let's look at the buff duration this time of Empowered Shadow. And again, if you've noticed that it didn't like the word, then type it in again, 95799. The duration on me is, let's say it is greater than, let's say less than or equal to 4 seconds. So I have a shadow orb, and then you get to select in between here and or. So in this case it's and my buff duration of Empowered Shadow is less than or equal to 4 seconds. So don't tell me to use Mind Blast again unless unless I'm about to run out of my empowered shadow, because I don't want to lose it. I want it to be refreshed. So hit OK, toggle that off, go back to getting shadow orbs. Okay, there's my shadow orb. Mind Blast. There we go. Now if you look down here, it's about to say, it would normally say yes, go ahead and use it again, but I'm not going to because it hasn't met the criteria of being under 5 seconds. So now I'm going to use it again and rinse and repeat. So this just shows you the logic you can build in. This isn't actually part of the logic, this is just to show you the duration of the empowered shadow. To show you how this all kind of plays together, I'll put all my dots on and you can see why it's interesting to use this, and it would be difficult to monitor these things elsewhere. And when I'm not dotting, a Shadow Priest is always just doing this Mind Flay thing, so channeling that. I'm going to put that dot back on, hit Mind Blast, and it looks like the middle one needs to be refreshed, and do my filler spell. And my first dot needs to be reapplied, and now my Mind Blast needs to be done. So it's kind of like spinning plates. And Vampiric Touch put back on. So that's kind of how this rotation plays out using these monitors here. Personally, I don't like to watch these numbers clock down from 15 to 25 seconds. So what I do is kind of like what I did on the dispersion, is I say only let me know that I need to do this. In other words, don't only show me this icon if the duration max, or the top end, is, I'm going to say 5 seconds. So go into each of these and say duration max 5 seconds. Okay, now it's a subtle difference, but you'll see when I apply them, they disappear because they're on there and they have more than 5 seconds remaining. So now it's kind of a clean view, and I can just go about my business and do my filler spells and move around as needed, and they're only going to show up if they need to be refreshed. And now Mind Blast, my filler again. This one needs to be refreshed. My little shadow clones going in. And this needs to be refreshed. And Mind Blast. The reason that my third dot does not need to be refreshed is because it gets reapplied through another ability. But you can see how the timing will never, it'll change and it won't be consistent because you have to do things while you're fighting. So well, now I'm out of mana. So that's kind of how that all plays out. One thing to be aware of, if you dot this guy, and it's not showing the buff here, and if I hit escape and I click on this guy, it's going to show me like, hey, you don't have a dot on that one. But if I go back to this guy, it does. So just be aware that if you're saying track something on your target, it's sensitive to what you have targeted. So alright, that's it for the basic buffs and debuffs. Kind of you can see how it can get as complicated as you need, or you can just monitor some basic stuff.